Hi, I'm Sean Mooney, professor at the University of Washington and Chief Research Information Officer of UW Medicine. Over the past 2 years, we have been creating an initiative in medical data science, and as part of that, we have created this seminar. Speakers will include world-leading scientists who will tell us about how data can impact human health and their healthcare. Please use the link below to register for our mailing list to hear about future events in this series. We hope you enjoy them.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So we're really excited to have Dr. Lucila Ohno-Machado today with us. She is the Health Sciences Associate Dean for Informatics and Technology and the founding chief of the Division of Biomedical Informatics in the Department of Medicine at the University of California, San Diego. She has recently been appointed as the Deputy Dean for Biomedical Informatics, where she's going to lead biomedical informatics and data science at Yale School of Medicine starting 2023. Amongst these several awards and recognition that she has gotten in this field, she has received the American Medical Informatics Association Leadership Award, as well as the William W. Stead Award for Thought Leadership in Informatics. Today, she is going to be talking about informatics and data science, promoting fairness in health data analytics. And she's going to discuss the potential consequences of the increased use of predictive models in healthcare, particularly coming in the context of increased sharing of clinical data, leading to issues in privacy, validation, and representativeness of AI models. We're really excited to have you, Dr. Machado, and over to you, and really excited to hear your work.
Thank you so much, and for the organizers for the opportunity to present to you today. I will try to monitor chat, but sometimes I can't. So if there are any pressing questions that need interruption, please do interrupt by audio to me. And today I'm going to talk about informatics and data science and promoting fairness in health data analytics, but I'll touch a lot about the origin of the data more than on techniques to correct this a posteriori. Let me go into presentation mode and ask you if everything is looking correct to you at this point.
Yes, it all looks perfect.
If I can.
Not now. I think you were in the slideshow mode earlier, but now it just shifted to.
Let me do it again here. I just have this chat box right in front of me.
Yeah, this is perfect.
To remove. So in terms of the informatics and the data science, again, I will concentrate on how we acquire data and how we move along with that. So biomedical informatics, as you know, has a lot of subspecialties, each one here in one of the rectangles. And of course, we'll concentrate on just a few today on data privacy and data analysis. So let me go directly into data for predictive analytics and AI. These are some examples of what we did in the past, or some we're still doing, and they all carry with them some elements of what are the data used to build these models and to validate them. Are they representative of the overall population, and especially of the ones that you're going to apply these models towards? And again, the goal here is to share data in a way that we all produce better models, in models that are applicable to the individuals that we are working with. So I will talk about what's partially consented data that's I designated as such, mostly to say that there are data out there that people consented to, but they're not exactly sure of how those data are being used. And I'll give some examples of that. Electronic health records in particular, every time you go to a doctor, you sign up and you get notified that data will be used for research, but you don't quite know what that is. And there are data from clinical studies in which the consent is much more explicit, is what data will be used for what particular purpose. And so that I would call fully consented data. But we know that re-identification success from so-called de-identified data only depends on what is disclosed and how much they're willing to invest in terms of re-identifying a particular target. So nothing is perfect, and so-called de-identified data are just moderately de-identified. And there are currently two ways to de-identify data legally: by expert determination, which is rarely used, and by safe harbor, which is HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, determines that there are 18 types of identifiers, and as long as you remove those, the data are considered de-identified and no longer need to undergo IRB approval, for example. But now that's very risky, because we and others have shown over and over that this data can actually be re-identified. And I put a mark here, or special font red, in biometrics, because a lot of us are dealing with genetic data. And even though it might not be considered a biometric, we all know it works like a biometric. So what are the privacy risks? So obviously identifiers such as names won't be disclosed, but if you have a biometric unique to Lisa, then all you need is to get that fingerprint from Lisa and match against a public database, and you know exactly that she's pregnant and her income is 60K. Right, so biometrics are removed for the identified data. But do you actually need biometrics? And in fact, you don't. If you have unique combinations of things that you know about Lisa, that A equals 10, B equals 20, you know that she is participating in that particular database, then you just read out the rest. So there are unique combinations of information that you know about Lisa that can be problematic. The other thing is you don't even need for things to be unique about Lisa, because imagine there are two entries and you don't know which one is Lisa. So you won't know income, but you know the diagnosis of pregnancy in this case. So privacy is being breached in different ways, and there is no way to control that, even though there were techniques called K-anonymity, L-diversity, and so on and so forth, but nothing is privacy guarantee. So since genomes are like biometrics, they should be treated as HIPAA identifiers, but in fact, that's not exactly what happens. We also saw examples of breaches that in this case for a very good purpose to identify a criminal, but it was important to open a DNA privacy debate when this happened a couple of years ago in the Golden State Killer case. So privacy protection solutions, there are data-centric ones, that are institution or people-centric ones, and now I'll just briefly talk about those so that you know. We have a yearly competition on privacy of genomes that started with the iDash projects and continues to today. Had competition from all over the Northern Hemisphere, and we are continuing on several tracks, and they're shown here. Homomorphic encryption, confidential computing, blockchain technology is a new one, and there are some press about this over the years. But now, one thing that we do, particularly with electronic health records, but more recently with genomes, is that we try to compute leaving them at the institutions that they were collected. And this helps in terms of trust, and it helps even in terms of compute time sometimes, in order to get data that cannot move out of an enclave to be computed together with data that cannot move from a second enclave or to a third one. So the next slide is all you need to remember from this talk and memorize is that distributed computing is all about decomposing the algorithms. So if I can get the next one, let me see. Yeah, so here it is, and it's not a joke. It's just saying that because of a regression model, in this case, a logistic regression model, is based on two main calculations of the first derivative and the Hessian matrix. If you can decompose that computation into the sites, the particular sites, then you never need to actually centralize the data in one place, because you can just make this computation at the different sites. And that's what we do in terms of the distributed model. No patient data needs to be sent, only aggregates. Now, again, it's no joke that you need to remember this and so on, because the same applies to a variety of other algorithms. So let me go to distributed analysis. So I showed one that you have one hospital, a particular set of data, the other hospital with a particular set of data, and you compute with them together without ever having to centralize the database. That's also something called vertical partitions, in which you have information from a patient on one side and the other variables on another side, and you can also compute without centralizing, as long as you know which row, so to speak, is patient A1, A2, and so on. So I just wanted to say that this is a much more involved, complicated calculation than when we do with the horizontal partitions on the left-hand side. So speaking about other things we can do about the identification, I would say there are also EHRs are highly regulated, but personal monitors and other things are not. So we are in a point that the legislation really needs to be modified to accommodate the threats to privacy. And even the name of a database, being able to know that the person is in the database, but not even getting any information from inside the database, that can breach privacy. So imagine a public de-identified database of a stigmatizing condition X, the condition X database. If you can figure out that the person is in the database without getting any information out of it, you already breach privacy, which is of concern, of course. So we have now a new project, Data Center of Excellence in Genome Science, we just got last year, in terms wanting to do genomics for everyone and emphasizing diversity, but at the same time emphasizing the privacy of those data. And the Center for Admixed Science and Technology wants particularly to address individuals who were so far excluded from genome analysis. And as you know, there are some important findings that later are recalled because either they don't apply for whole ancestry groups, or they don't apply for more particular ones. Here are just two examples, but there are many GWAS that have been corrected a posteriori by meta-analysis, and the correction typically involved one only ancestry. Now we want to account for a mixed population structure. And as you know, these are hard to compute with and are primarily, in many cases, individuals who are removed from analysis because they complicate the analysis. But our thinking is that admixed individuals constitute a large percentage of the world population. In accounting for one global ancestry will not help these admixed individuals. And in fact, computing with admixed populations has shown to improve the power of variant discovery and portability in GWAS, as we would expect. Right, but what can we do about this? So it's a combination of genetics and informatics, particularly as polygenic risk score become more popular. They are going to be produced to assess risks for many diseases. Can we improve the methods? Can we find causes beyond associations? Can we act on these findings? Can the scores be continuously evaluated and models updated as needed? And can we do all this without introducing more biases that lead to more discrimination? Can we protect privacy? What are we going to do with individuals from mixed ancestry? And that's what our new center is looking into. So our vision is that no one will be left out, and we will replace concepts such as race and ethnicity with a combination of genetic and social determinants of health that are individual to a particular person, as opposed to assuming that everyone with that particular ethnicity kind of does the same thing. So my recent example is not all Brazilians like soccer. I happen to be one that does, but if you put ethnicity as more general, you will be making mistakes along the way. And our whole premise of precision medicine, precision health, and of our center is to do particular, to be as individualized as we can, as personalized as we can. So we will develop new methods and tools that allow genetic findings to be applicable to all. And you're probably thinking about, well, then you will need millions and millions of data points of observations. And that's exactly what we're going to work with. We, again, to predict a trait, want to dissociate genetic determinants and social determinants, and within genetics, the variant effects and ancestry effects particular to an individual. And we want to do that with algorithms and tools to analyze data that can stay in their enclave. So that distributed computing I was talking about a few minutes ago. So how do we do that? So on the left-hand side, you see the patchwork of what one can be: highly admixed individual with red and blue portions of the chromosome from two main ancestries. And we are developing methods that can consider this patchwork of ancestry to predict disease. In particular, Melissa Gimrek deals a lot with structural variants such as tandem repeats, and these are shown to be highly different in diverse populations. So very important now, so for the admixed populations. And my colleague Kelly Fraser is looking into HLA analysis, which, as you know, is a very complex portion of the chromosome. So you have those combinations, and we want to, again, do predictions that are more individualized. But as I mentioned before, you need to have a lot of data and millions of data. How do we do that? So we also want to have socioeconomic determinants of health that are typically removed from clinical narrative data in terms of the electronic health records. So natural language processing is an important factor in this case. And as I said, even though ethnicity was serving as a proxy somehow for socioeconomic determinants, that is, again, something we want to avoid and replace with more personalized data. Genome privacy is at the core of everything we want to do. And so our algorithms are targeting being very private or being very explicit about the privacy that is conferred. And the distributed analytics is a way to build trust and to build efficiencies across databases. So the distributed databases we are working with right now are the All of Us program, which has many more than these participants right now. Actually, I think we are bordering 600K right now. And of those, not all have whole genome sequence data, but more than 100,000 are available already. And then the Million Veteran program that began earlier, that has already, probably 1 million by now, and has whole genome sequencing as well as genotype arrays. So what we want to do is the secure federated algorithms that do the distributed computing across this, what will be at least 2 million observations. And then that will allow our admixed component to be exercised in this analysis. So as I move ahead, again, we lead the All of Us consortium for California. We had recruited more than 50,000 participants, and you may say, well, but you're an informatics person. Why are you in this business? Because I do believe that diverse data you get at the source. This business of fixing it later is mitigation, but if you can get at the source, that will benefit everybody. So we are looking into that right now. And as I move to the East Coast, to Yale in particular, we are adding 2 sites in which we will improve also the low-income participation with Puerto Rico and New Haven being areas in which the poverty level, the rates are very high. And we do that with partnerships with the community. So we do all of that, but will the implementation of polygenic risk scores at medical center, will it be a reality? Well, we will see. Will clinicians use it? Will the models have quality assessment? Will have local validations? Will there be a control group so we can know that the things are happening because of the polygenic risk scores? When will models be reevaluated and how? So there is a whole implementation science after the analysis, or iteratively with the analysis, that will have to be done. So PRS and AI models in general, they require a lot of data. We will need to build access to large data repositories. So that's what we're doing with the distributed analysis to enhance policy and technological solutions to compute with this data. And then on the aggregate, I firmly believe we need to aggregate data from different countries, and aggregate means virtually aggregate in order to compute with more types of genomes and make more robust models. In terms of clinical data networks, it's been something I've been working with for more than a decade. We put together the first time that the University of California joined virtually the clinical data warehouses from all its major medical centers in order to compute with more data. We also have colleagues at in LA doing joining with the network. In the VA national database, Vinci, also participated, again, because of the ability to do this without having to centralize or to move data around. And after the fact, others join in terms of EHR data or in terms of models or techniques in intellectual contribution to the clinical data networks. More recently, when the pandemic hit and no one knew exactly what was going on, and there were vaccines weren't there, the whole field was beginning to be studied. What we wanted to do is to put it in place quickly. In fact, in 6 weeks, we did put together a network that would do data discovery from clinical records to try to answer questions that were pressing and that there weren't studies or trials about that. So we got the VA to participate in early 2020, as well as the other entities that were already in our network. We had one organization in Germany as well, in order to join forces. And at that point, the number of hospitalized patients and understanding what's happening to them was quite important. And each entity didn't have enough, or in the VA case, probably didn't have enough diversity in terms of gender and age diversity in order to make more robust conclusions. So we did that. And one of the questions early in the pandemic was whether ACE inhibitors would alter outcomes for those patients with COVID-19. Should we stop delivering ACE inhibitors and replacing them with other types of antihypertensive medication? And by analysis of 10,000 hospitalized patients from 10 institutions in the beginning of the pandemic, we were able to show no, ACE inhibitors seemed to be fine. There was no higher mortality. In fact, there was higher mortality if medications were stopped, and there was absolutely no statistical difference between other types like ARBs and other antihypertensive medications. So that was useful, and that was subsequently confirmed in larger studies in trials as well. So it's good to understand that the virtual aggregation of records had some importance. We also did that distributed logistic regression exactly to understand whether for hospitalized patients in our institutions, it was whether it was showing that race, ethnicity were contributing factors for mortality. And we showed that practically that there wasn't a difference, meaning that once patients were admitted, the mortality was about the same. But of course, that we cannot study this way for hospitalized patients. It's fine, but also for those who didn't have access to care, it's where we might see, you know, a huge disparity in terms of outcomes. In terms of the hospitals, we analyzed for hospitalized patients, there was no difference. So doing the right thing, you know, it wasn't a pandemic and it wasn't a public health emergency. Is it ethical to share? Because people have not been explicitly asked, can you share your electronic health record? It was all shared on a so-called de-identified manner, but we now know that de-identified manner is not sufficient. So is that ethical not to share? Because new discoveries in acceleration of science in clinical care do depend on sharing. And then we also have this question, could people choose, is it practical? What if a massive number of people withdraw their data? That's an ethical question as well, as important as the other ones. So for a long time, we've been looking into this area first with a project called Informed Consent for Clinical Data Use in Research, in which we asked people, including those with diverse backgrounds. And this is wasn't specifically for this project, but it's something we've always been looking into, is the consent for data and biosample sharing in underserved populations. Does it depend on who is obtaining consent? Or for example, on the study on Latinos, we did the pilot with that group. Do patients understand what they are consenting for? What types of sharing is acceptable in regards to American Indian populations? And then DNA variants in Kawasaki disease, are those different for African-American population? So we've always been interested in health disparities in ways that we can help also understand the consent in those populations, because if people don't consent, then they will continue to be excluded in studies, and we will continue to find or build models that are not generalizable. So instead of the current state in which the healthcare institution decides through data use agreements, through other mechanisms, whether a particular researcher can get data on individual without knowing the individuals with a de-identified manner, we wanted to pass that to the patient and see what selections would be done. What are people willing to share or not, and with particular recipients. And I was fortunate enough that those selections were going to be honored for the duration of the study in the institutions participating. So just briefly, what we got is a selection in which you can unselect or opt in or opt out. We did 2 arms in this case, and it could be with UCSD and the VA hospital, with any nonprofit organization or for-profit organizations. We picked items that were historically known to be sensitive to the patients, and we included in these options. We, again, built the system on top of our clinical data warehouse. So when the requests came for studies for that particular set of patients in the study, we would honor those preferences. We wanted this to be real rather than the many studies that existed in the hypothetical. If you were to choose, would you share this or would you share that? In this case, it was exactly, we will do this for the next 2 years of this study. What selections do you want? So we went ahead, and this is a little bit difficult to parse. It is our first study, which is a smaller number of patients, but on the left-hand side, you see the particular variable that was consulted. And then on the red portion, on the left-hand side, is people who wanted to omit that variable to everyone. They don't want to share with any of those categories. And you see that's about 10%, and it's about some things like billing or past pregnancy came high on the list, whereas other things such as sexuality and treatment, genetic tests came very low, and people wanted to share that. On the very other extreme, on the right-hand side with blue, light blue, you will see the people who didn't have preferences. So you can do whatever you're doing, share with everyone that you deem appropriate. And so you see that 50% for each item, about 50% of the people were totally fine with what we do today, which is reassuring. And the other two categories are, well, you also can share with nonprofits or just share with UCSD and the VA in this purple aspects here. So the conclusion is, yes, people, the large majority want to share, but some are selective in which they want to share, which institution or which type of institutions they want to share with. And later we added one more institution and added more cases. And we concluded basically the same thing with certain nuance, but essentially about 10% of the people didn't want to share with anybody a particular item. About 40 to 50% want to share with everyone. So it's the equivalent here. Is the same order as the on the right-hand side, dark green. Please continue what you're doing. And then the lighter green is, again, very selective, just with UCSD and the local VA or with nonprofit institutions as well. And there were higher rates of sharing opt-out forms as we predicted, and as is the case in so many other studies. So we passed that phase and we started another project in which we want to do this consent across institutions. And we came up with a strategy that has an immutable ledger, that has smart contracts in order to do those permissions. And we are in the middle of this project right now called I Agree. I don't have a particular spell out of the acronym, but we felt I Concur was too elitist and we just wanted to be more simple this time around. And we used blockchain technology exactly because of the immutable ledger and the smart contract capabilities. So I won't go through the details, but essentially the patient can select which items in which institutions they want to share, again, for particular recipients. And this is, again, both an innovation in terms of the application area, but also there are some other aspects, technical aspects that we're looking into. And we did all that with a very American approach in which the individual is the center and is the deciding point, whereas that's not true in all nations. And with certain American Indian populations, that individual aspect of preference is subsumed by a group preference. And we have been studying that point as well, which again, it's very important because even an individual wants to share, if the individuals belong to a particular group that doesn't want to share, that constitutes an impasse that needs to be dealt with. So I just invite you to, take a look at some of our group's preliminary findings about that, and we will implement any system in a way that is respectful of those individuals and of groups. So here we have on the left-hand side, individuals who we consulted, past and present members of the Southwest Oklahoma Intertribal Health Board, lawyers, and other tribal members. And then the groups were represented by all this bullet points on the right-hand side, in that they were consulted about how do you see the preferences, and in particular, the genetic code, as well as other type of specimens and everything to be shared. So again, it was an approach to consult before we do anything. and where the formal interactions happen and informal as well. And then with individually and together with reading materials more than once. And again, there were several facets of it, which my colleagues who work in this area were very careful and very comprehensive in doing. It was hard because also it was the pandemic time, so some of the interactions were harder and took longer to happen. So we concluded that everyone is unique, and so are groups of people, and there are different expectations. So for example, eye contact and physical touch is when interacting with elders, use gentle touch during your handshake. Do not spend too much time looking them in the eye, which might be contrary to what you would be expected to do in other interactions. The boundaries with compliments, providing food to the community, spend time in the community, all important aspects, and with examples also in this article that you can take a look at. So very important, very informative. And as we say, we're always learning new things, and it's so important that we understand that these groups have different expectations. So in terms of data sharing for rare and common diseases, emergencies, special populations, everything is different, right? So like I said, they're partially consented data, even if de-identified, can pose ethical challenges. And consented data require data access to follow the process explained in consent form. So I've been saying this for a long time now. Just because people consented for study A and people consented for study B, it doesn't mean you can link those two data and study the linked data from A and B, because they have not consented in particular for that. So please remember this, that protecting the privacy of individuals is critical if we want them to participate and that have the benefits of all of the scientific findings that are derived from data science. Helping researchers find and access data is also critical. I haven't talked about metadata and other things here, but these are important components. We do all this work, we gather the data, we protect the data, and then if no one uses it, that's unethical as well. Transparency in data use is critical, and consent for data linkage is necessary. So the need for consent will not damage AI research, it will facilitate it. And we should promote AI fairness as capital, right? Finding, accessing, interoperating with, and reusing, as well as lowercase fairness, which is people to understand the risks to privacy and then understand also the benefits of sharing those data, meaning that any findings will also probably be applicable to them as well, and certainly unknown to be applicable if individuals do not participate in research. So with that, I would say big data are a big deal, and asking people is one of the ways of doing it. It has its own caveats as well, which I won't discuss at length, but at least you're trying to engage and you're trying to make sure all these expenditures, all this intellectual expenditures as well are done in a way that is more applicable to everyone and not just people from one particular ancestry. So with that, I want to thank for the investments in privacy technology being done by multiple projects, investments in recruitment of diversity, investments in distributed computing, and in trying to understand special populations, because that's been the work we were pursuing for several years, and I continue to do even as I move institutions. So thank you so much again for the opportunity to talk to you, and hopefully you have some questions or remarks.